In a quiet villa in Kifisia, northern Athens, a group of exiled Albanians trained to bring down Europe's most isolated communist regime. What began as a covert mission soon turned into one of the CIA and MI6's most embarrassing failures. After World War II, Albania didn't just go communist, it went full Stalin. Under the iron rule of Enver Hoxha, this tiny Balkan country became one of the most repressive, paranoid regimes in the world. Hoxha purged rivals, banned religion, and turned Albania into a surveillance state so intense that even the East Germans would raise an eyebrow. While most Eastern Bloc countries at least pretended to cooperate, Hoxha trusted no one, not the West, not the Soviets, and definitely not his neighbours. He broke with Yugoslavia in 1948, denounced Khrushchev's USSR a decade later, and eventually slammed the door on Mao's China as well. By the mid-Cold War, Albania wasn't part of any bloc. It was a lonely, armed fortress ruled by a man who saw enemies everywhere. But back in the late 1940s, the West saw an opportunity. Albania was still closely tied to Moscow, sat just across the Adriatic from Italy, and bordered Greece, a country that had just recovered from a brutal civil war. Western planners feared that Albania could soon become a Soviet springboard into southern Europe. And so, in quiet exile, communities scattered across Italy, Greece, and the UK, anti-communist Albanians, royalists who supported the return of King Zogul, nationalists and wartime fighters, waited for their moment. That moment would come in the form of a secret mission, a mission launched from a villa in Athens, a mission called Operation Valuable. In 1949, British intelligence, MI6, decided it was time to strike. Albania, they believed, was very vulnerable. They believed that the communist regime was brutal but brittle, and with the right push, maybe it would collapse. Soon afterwards, the CIA also joined in, and together, the two agencies launched a top-secret operation that would go down as one of the Cold War's biggest fiascos. The Manetta Villa in Kifisia was handpicked as the launchpad for a covert war. Behind its stone walls, British officers and American operatives began training a select group of exiled Albanians, men who had fled Hoxha's regime and were desperate for a chance to return and bring it down. At the villa, they learned everything from guerrilla warfare and sabotage to covert radio operations and how to operate behind enemy lines. These were not professional soldiers. Many were young, politically divided, and had little training before the operation. But they were desperate, committed, and willing to parachute into one of the most dangerous countries in Europe. What they didn't know was that the regime they were trying to overthrow had already been tipped off. Between 1949 and 1952, the first wave of agents were parachuted into Albania in small, scattered groups. Most dropped in under the cover of night, landing in remote mountain regions or near villages believed to be sympathetic to the anti-communist cause. But nearly all of them never made it out. Some were captured the moment they hit the ground, ambushed by Albanian forces who had seemed to be waiting for them. Others were arrested within days, hunted by the Sigurimi, Hoxha's ruthless secret police. Interrogations turned into torture turned into execution, and the mission's pace didn't slow. It simply fed more men into the grinder. The reason for the catastrophic failure soon became clear. The entire operation had been compromised from the start. At the heart of the betrayal was Kim Philby, a high-ranking British intelligence officer and secret Soviet agent. As a member of the notorious Cambridge Five, Philby had direct access to top-level planning between M16 and the CIA, and he was feeding it straight to Moscow. That intelligence was then passed to Albania, giving the Sigurimi precise drop locations, names, and radio frequencies. It wasn't just a leak, it was a massacre in slow motion. Back in Tirana, Enver Hoxha used the failed landings to his full advantage. He portrayed the infiltrators as Western-backed terrorists, ramped up his purges, and intensified Albania's isolation. Far from weakening the regime, the operation had strengthened its grip and justified years of brutal internal repression. By the time the last agent was dropped, Operation Valuable wasn't just failing, it was already dead. Nearly every man who had been sent into Albania had been captured, tortured, or killed, or kept in prison indefinitely. Not a single successful resistance movement emerged. It wasn't a covert war, it was a one-sided slaughter. But the real damage went beyond Albania's borders. The mission had handed Enver Hoxha exactly what he wanted, proof that the West was out to destroy him. He used it to justify sweeping purges, mass arrests, and even tighter control over his already isolated nation. Albania slammed its doors shut, disappearing behind bunkers and barbed wire, harder and colder than ever before. Meanwhile, in London and Washington, trust inside the intelligence community began to crack. The scale of the betrayal, fed directly through Soviet double agents who were seemingly everywhere, shook M16 and the CIA to their core. It wasn't just a failure on the ground, it was a revelation. The enemy had been inside the room the whole time. And the Manetta Villa, the elegant hideout in the suburb of Athens, once buzzing with the planning of a secret war, slipped back into quiet obscurity. Few today remember it played a role in one of the Cold War's most humiliating miscalculations. Operation Valuable is no longer remembered for its bravery or ambition, but as a cautionary tale of what happens when betrayal lurks within and no one sees it coming. It's a lesser-known chapter of Cold War espionage, but nonetheless one that quietly set the tone for the covert battles that followed.